Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong, and welcome to Cracking Addiction. And we have with us Dr. Laura Petracek. So, Laura, today we're going to talk about the eighth step. What is the eighth step?
The eighth step is made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all.
Right. Now, when I first read for the first time the eighth step, I shuddered almost as much as I shuddered when I read the fourth step, which was making the inventory. It's very challenging, isn't it? What do you think, and how did it? How was it for you?
It is really challenging. I mean, the fourth step, it's terrifying to look at the wreckage of our
Hmm.
past, my past, and what my
Hmm.
addiction caused. And then the eighth step is
You have to
scary in
do it
the
all over
sense,
again.
well, you're not necessarily doing it all over again, but you're taking actions to repair the damage done. And that to me is even more challenging because you don't know how you're going to be received if it
Hmm.
includes people, which it usually does. I
Hmm.
mean, it can it be in regards to institutions or, um, something else, but usually it's people that we need
Yeah.
to make amends to. Yeah.
So making the list, it's almost the same as making an inventory, isn't it?
Well, again, it's one step on this adventure, one step beyond looking at our um, character defaults, as someone recently called it, instead of defects of character. Because the A step is, now we're trying to address the shame from all those shortcomings or all those actions that cause harm to other people. It's more of a social type of step, whereas the fourth step is more individual. It's us making a list, and the eighth step is more of a social step in that we're addressing people who we have made harm to, where we have caused harm.
How long does that take?
Uh, it takes a long time. I mean, one thing about the step is initially my first eight step, had to do with the damage my drinking and drugging had caused. But then the subsequent eight steps, now you're clean and sober. Now I was clean and sober. So to me, it's been harder down the road because I don't have alcohol or drugs to hide behind the wreckage that I've caused. It's my own moral failing. So it's for me more challenging to look at. And also, the other aspect for me is having bipolar disorder, having to look at uh, the wreckage that has caused, even though I'm clean and sober, and to make amends in that regard.
Right, right. So there's a lot of self-reflection in there, and I would suggest that for some people there's a lot of self-flagellation, but we can have a discussion about what the difference is between self-reflection and self-flagellation, perhaps in another day. But it does require sitting down and thinking about, what happened then, what did I do then, who did I hurt then. So there's a lot of sitting down and just thinking, isn't there?
Yes, there's a lot of reflection. And I mean, we don't have to wait for another podcast to talk about self flagellation. People do tend to beat up on themselves. This step almost lends itself to that, but it's not meant for that. It's meant to making a list of all persons you had
Hmm.
harmed and becoming willing. It doesn't mean you're actually going to. That's the ninth step. The ninth step is making
Yeah,
amends. This step is
yeah.
about being willing. And
Mm.
because that is a um, stance that's necessary before we could actually make amends, we have to be willing.
Mm.
Um, but it's not an easy step
Why do they get stuck?
because they jump ahead. They're like, oh no, I make a list and then I have to become willing. And oh no, I don't know if I want to face my ex boss. because then I'm going to have to pay thousands of dollars. Or I don't know if I want to face my spouse or child because, they may hate me even more than they do, or maybe they won't forgive me. And then what am I going to do? So people future trip a lot on this step. And then that stops them from just taking it one part at a time. And the first part, I've just heard over the years, and what I've said to my own sponsees is you're only making a list. That's it. Don't go to the next part yet, because that's going to trip you up. Just make the
Mm,
list. And that helps a lot of people, not to
mm.
future trip, but what this amends is going to look like, or how's it all going to play out?
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice, isn't it? You're just making a list. You're just writing something on a piece of paper.
Well, you're not just writing something on a piece of paper. You're writing names. A lot of times people float these names in their head of who they've harmed. And they're like, Laura, well, I'd have to write that down. I already have the list in my head. I'm like, well, here's the difference. When you put pen to paper and write those names down, it becomes more real,
Yeah.
the harm that you've caused. And it also
Mm,
uh, is it points to what the next step is going to be, or the next part of it, the next section of the step, which is becoming willing. And it makes it more real. When it's in your head, you're like, oh, yeah, I think I hurt that person, or oh, yeah, I messed up on that job. But when you write it down, it's irrefutable evidence. It's like, okay, there it is, black and white. I
mm,
can't get around this. I can't rationalize, make excuses. This is who it
mm.
is. And, I have to face it, even though I don't really want to. Yeah.
And this is in the context of the seventh step, which is, of course, where you've, on a daily basis, asked God to remove your defects of character. So, is failure to actually progress onto the eighth step a defect of character, do you think?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because there's a phrase in the rooms called delay is dangerous. So, delaying making this list, becoming willing, why it's dangerous is because some people have relapsed behind not making amends and carrying all this, shame and regret in their head, self-flagellation. And then what do? Well, they're going to pick up a drink, and that's not going to help anybody, or it's not definitely not going to help
Mm,
themselves. So that's why
right.
delay is dangerous, and it's important to, continue with the courage you've used for the first seven steps, now for the eighth step.
Now, in the fourth and fifth step, we have our sponsor, don't we?
Yes, you do have your sponsor helping you, or your
Who have you got,
therapist.
or your therapist, yeah. Who have you got helping you in the eighth step?
You have your sponsor, and they'll usually say over and over, make a list. Well, I don't know. I don't really want to. This person's going to be so mad. They're already so mad. Or I know that some things that have been suggested to you and that I've suggested to sponsees is put the names on the list that you're more comfortable making amends to, and the people that or places that are really, that you don't want to make amends, or you feel it's going to be a very complicated situation. Put those names at the bottom of the list, the more difficult amends. But the amends that seem that they'll be easier, put those on the top, and then it helps you go through, make that list. It makes it a little
Right.
easier.
Yeah. Little steps first.
Yeah.
Go for the easy wins first. Yeah.
Yeah, go for the easy ones first.
Right.
Although, you don't necessarily know. You may think
Mm,
it's an easy win, and
yeah.
yeah, and then when you hear feedback from the other person, you're like, oh man, okay. Um, yeah, I had went. I don't know. Well, I had made an amends once to one of my professors, and then he proceeded to, you know, name many other of my shortcomings. So, and I thought that was going to be easy win. So I was like, no, I really misjudged that one. So you don't really know how the person's going to respond. Most people
Mm.
are welcoming, but some
But
people
we
are still
haven't we
hurt and
haven't done that
worried.
yet, have we?
Yeah,
We were just making the
that's
list.
the next step. Yeah, thank you. I'm
That's the
jumping
next
ahead.
step.
See, I'm doing
Yeah,
exactly what you're not supposed to do. And what stops you from making the list?
yeah,
Just
yeah,
make the
yeah.
list. I don't know. How are they going to react? Just make the list. Yeah, but what if they get more pissed off? Just make the list.
Right.
Make the list. You just say it like a broken record, and
Okay,
you
so
write it
let's
down.
talk about some of the practicalities here, right? You're writing something on a piece of paper that is so deeply personal and private. You know, what if it gets out? What if what kind of issues are there around privacy and respect?
Well, the privacy would be between you and your sponsor. Initially, I mean, the nice step is when you go out and make amends. That's a different story, as we've said, or a different step. But hopefully, your sponsor will keep your confidentiality, just as a therapist is. Although a sponsor isn't
Mm.
bound by the same law and ethics a therapist is, but
Mm.
they kind of aspire to that. So it's important to let the person know, look, I'm not going to tell anybody. Um,
Mm.
you know,
Because this is the first time that you're talking about other people. Yeah.
right.
Until now,
And
it's
not
all
just
been
talking
about,
about him, you're talking about how your actions affected other
yes,
people. That is
yeah,
not an easy pill to swallow.
yeah. So this is the first time that you're talking about other people. Everything else has all been an internal reflection between you and the sponsor and God and having to improve yourself and going on a journey of personal growth. But this is really the first time when your sponsor could really breach a kind of a relationship of trust and privacy there. So it's a really important decision to make to actually choose the sponsor.
Yes. It doesn't happen. I think it happens rarely. I mean, I've been clean and sober for years, and I haven't heard that happen too often. The times that I have heard it, confidentiality being broken, is if unfortunately your sponsor goes out and drinks again, and then maybe they say things they shouldn't say
Mm.
or share things they
Yeah,
shouldn't say. But otherwise, I think it's a rare occurrence, like let's say 1%, if even that, it's,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But it's still an issue to think about.
Yeah, it's an issue to think
Potentially
about, but
still,
I think
or
I think what gets in people's way is a lot. It's not so much not trusting the sponsor to keep your confidence, but it's having the courage and willingness to
yeah.
actually write these names down and face the havoc that you've left behind. It's not easy to face that or face those people.
Mm. So let's say you've done the list, right? I mean, how impactful is this step on recovery when you've actually got this piece of paper with your penciled lines and a list of names and what is it in and of itself? Do you get a sense of closure when you've done the list, or is it then simply the gateway to further angst regarding the next step?
So one thing about doing this step is that once you become willing to let go of the resentments, to make amends, to let go of blame and self pity, you recognize that we're all just ordinary garden variety human beings. And for a lot of people, that's a welcome relief instead of feeling like, the worst person in the world or sometimes the best person in the world. But it helps let go of that self loathing and beating up on yourself.
Right. So it is actually a part of a process of healing. It's has to be seen in that context, doesn't it?
Right. Because before you could rebuild relationships, you need to identify the relationships you've damaged. You have to work on
Yeah.
those first before you could
Yeah.
rebuild relationships.
Right. Right. Okay, so what message of hope would you give to someone contemplating an eighth step list?
Well, the message I would give is put your name on that list first. Put your name on the top, you
Mm,
know, because in a way, by putting my name in the top of the list, even though it's interesting, they do not have this in the literature, but this has become more commonplace throughout the years because there were so many barriers for people making this list, and understandably so. So someone finally said, put your name on the top of that list, because the person you need to make amends to first is yourself. And then by making amends to yourself, you could hopefully stop the process of being irresponsible and self-destructive, continuing those behaviors. So I
mm,
think the first message of hope is you're going to feel better about you because you're first going to make amends to yourself. And then it might fall a little bit easier to make a list of persons you have harmed and move forward from there. And you're going to feel better. You're going to feel better about yourself. You're not going to feel like such a piece of, you're just not going to feel all that self loathing.
all right, Laura. Well, look, thanks very much for your wisdom today. Um, Hopefully, we can speak again very soon about the next step.
Thank you, Fergal, and thank you for having me on your show.
That's all for today, folks. My name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong, and this has been Cracking Addiction.